Darkness lay over the earth as waters gathered beneath heavy clouds, and the order of the world stood on the edge of collapse. Violence had filled the land, and corruption spread through humanity, as recorded in the generations before the flood. God observed the earth and found it ruined, for all flesh had corrupted its way. Among the people stood Noah, a righteous man in his generation, walking faithfully. This account opens when judgment was determined and the course of history turned toward a night when waters would erase the living entirely. God instructed Noah to make an ark of gopher wood, giving precise measurements, rooms, and pitch inside and out. The structure was to preserve life during the coming deluge. God declared that waters would destroy all flesh under heaven, and everything on dry land would perish. With Noah, a covenant was established. He was commanded to bring his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives into the ark. Pairs of every living creature were gathered, along with food. Noah acted without deviation as generations watched under silent skies above. When the appointed time arrived, Noah entered the ark with his household, just as instructed. Animals came according to their kinds, 2 by 2, male and female, as directed. After 7 days, the waters of the flood came upon the earth. On that day, fountains of the great deep burst open, and the windows of the heavens were opened. Rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. The sound of falling water replaced all other sounds as the ground began to disappear beneath the growing flood. As rain continued, waters increased and lifted the ark from the ground. It rose above the earth and floated on the surface of the waters. The flood grew stronger, covering the land completely. Hills and rising ground vanished as waters prevailed. The ark moved upon the face of the waters, carried without guidance or anchor. Beneath it, the boundaries that once separated fields, paths, and settlements were erased. The separation between land and sea dissolved as the flood advanced without interruption. Waters rose higher still, prevailing greatly upon the earth. Mountains were covered, reaching depths far above their peaks. Every living thing that moved on the land outside the ark was overtaken. Birds, livestock, wild animals, and all creeping things perished as the waters overwhelmed them. Humanity outside the ark was blotted out, leaving no remnant. Only Noah and those with him in the ark remained alive. The world that existed before the flood was no longer visible beneath the waters. The rain did not cease until 40 days and nights were complete, yet the waters continued to rise long after. The flood prevailed upon the earth 150 days. The ark remained upon the waters, surrounded by an unbroken expanse. No shoreline, no summit, no trace of former life could be seen. Everything that had the breath of life in its nostrils on dry land had died. The record states that all were blotted out, leaving only what had been preserved within the ark. Inside the ark, life continued as the waters held the earth in silence. Outside, the flood maintained its dominance, unchallenged and complete. The ark floated without turning back, sustained by the waters that had destroyed the world beneath it. Time passed marked only by days and nights, rain replaced by stillness. The flood had reached its full strength, and nothing remained outside the ark. The account pauses with the waters covering all, awaiting the moment when change would begin. At the height of the flood, the waters covered the earth entirely, and the ark rested upon nothing but the deep. The former world was gone, hidden beneath layers of water. No movement disturbed the surface beyond the drifting vessel. All flesh outside had perished, and the flood held its dominion. The narrative stands at this turning point, with destruction complete and preservation contained within the ark alone, as the waters continued to prevail without retreat. God remembered Noah and every living thing with him in the ark. A wind passed over the earth, and the waters began to subside. The fountains of the deep were closed, and the windows of heaven were restrained. Rain fell no longer, and the flood ceased its increase. Gradually, the waters started to recede from the earth. After 150 days, their strength diminished. The surface of the flood shifted, marking the first change since the waters had covered all things. As the waters decreased, the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. It no longer drifted freely, but remained settled upon unseen ground beneath the flood. Though the ark rested, the waters still covered the earth. Month after month passed as the waters continued to recede. In the 10th month, on the first day, the tops of the mountains became visible. What had once been entirely submerged began to emerge, marking the slow return of the earth's surface. After 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark. He sent out a raven, which went to and fro until the waters dried up from the earth. The bird did not return with evidence of rest. Noah then sent out a dove to see whether the waters had abated from the face of the ground. The dove found no resting place and returned to the ark. The water still covered the surface, and the earth was not yet ready. After 7 days, Noah sent out the dove again. This time it returned in the evening with a freshly plucked olive leaf in its beak. The sign showed that the waters had receded from the earth. Noah waited again for 7 days. When he sent the dove out once more, it did not return. The absence of the bird marked a change. The land had begun to dry, and the earth was entering its final stage of emergence. In the 601st year of Noah's life, the waters were dried from the earth. Noah removed the covering of the ark and saw that the surface was dry. Though the ground was visible, he remained inside. By the 2nd month, the earth was fully dry. The flood had ended, and the waters no longer covered the land. The long period of confinement drew to a close, as the earth stood ready for life beyond the ark. God instructed Noah to come out of the ark, along with his wife, his sons, and his sons' wives. Every living thing was also commanded to leave, including birds, animals, and creeping things. They were to spread across the earth and multiply. Noah obeyed the instruction, preparing to leave the ark that had preserved them. The moment marked the transition from preservation to restoration, as life prepared to return to the open earth once again. Noah went out with his family, followed by every animal according to its kind. Creatures departed by families, birds, livestock, and creeping things, each according to their kinds. The ark was emptied, and life stepped onto dry ground. The flood that had destroyed the former world had fully withdrawn. The earth stood uncovered beneath the sky, ready to receive those preserved through the waters. The movement from the ark marked the completion of the flood's physical retreat. With the ark emptied, the flood narrative reached its final transition. The waters that once dominated the earth were gone, leaving behind dry land. Life stood upon the ground again, separated from the vessel that had carried it through the flood. The long silence of the waters ended as the earth returned to form. The account pauses as humanity and animals stood upon the restored land, awaiting the words that would define what followed the flood. Noah built an altar to God upon the earth. He took from every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. God smelled the pleasing aroma. The offering marked the first act recorded after the flood. It stood upon the restored ground where water had once covered all. The altar signaled the conclusion of judgment and the beginning of what followed. The flood narrative shifted from destruction to declaration as the account continued beyond the waters. God resolved not to curse the ground again because of humanity. He declared that while the earth remained, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night would not cease. The pattern of the world was established to continue. God blessed Noah and his sons and instructed them to be fruitful and multiply, filling the earth. The continuation of life was affirmed, and the order of seasons was set in place after the flood. God established a covenant with Noah and his sons and with every living creature that came out of the ark. The covenant declared that never again would all flesh be cut off by waters of a flood. Never again would there be a flood to destroy the earth. The covenant extended beyond humanity to animals and future generations. It was declared as an everlasting covenant, defining the relationship between God, the earth, and all living beings after the flood. As a sign of the covenant, God set a bow in the clouds. When clouds gathered over the earth and the bow appeared, it served as a reminder of the covenant between God and all flesh. The bow was placed within the natural order, visible during rain. It stood as a sign that waters would not again become a flood to destroy all flesh. The appearance of the bow marked the completion of the covenant declaration following the flood. The sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. From them the earth was repopulated. Noah began to be a man of the soil, and the generations that followed spread across the earth. The narrative records the continuation of humanity from this point forward. The flood account transitions into genealogies and events beyond the waters. The preserved line moved into history, carrying the record forward beyond the flood itself. The earth stood renewed, shaped by the retreat of the waters. Rivers, land, and sky returned to their places. The separation between sea and land was restored. The flood no longer prevailed, and the conditions of the world resumed. The account reflects a world no longer submerged, governed by seasons and time. The flood had fulfilled its course, and the earth continued under the covenant declared. What remained was the ongoing record of generations descending from Noah. The narrative of the flood concludes within the broader record of early generations. The destruction of the former world and the preservation of life are set within the unfolding history. The ark, the waters, and the covenant stand as recorded events. The earth continued, populated by the descendants of Noah. The flood narrative ends without return to the waters, leaving the account positioned within the continuing genealogies and events that follow in the biblical record. Thus ends the account of the flood as recorded in Genesis. The waters came, prevailed, and receded according to what was written. Life was preserved within the ark and restored upon the earth. A covenant was established, and a sign was set in the clouds. The world continued under declared seasons and order. The flood narrative stands complete, enclosed within the record of early history, marking a defined beginning and conclusion within the written account.